Paradrama Tales. My husband's friend from the gym constantly texts him about her personal life. Things I feel aren't appropriate for a married man to discuss. He insists it's because she has no friends and he doesn't want her to feel alone. I trust him, but something about this doesn't sit right. It all started so innocently. He met her at the gym, a new member of the CrossFit community. He told me about her, how she was young and energetic, and how they'd bonded over the grueling workouts. They'd chat after class, exchange tips, and she'd laugh with the group. It seemed harmless enough at first, just a simple friendship. He even told me that she didn't have many friends, so he wanted to be kind and help her feel included. I never thought much of it. After all, he was just being a good friend, right? I trusted him. He always talked about how they were like a family at the gym, and I figured, why not? It was a group setting, and everyone seemed to get along. He assured me there was nothing to worry about. But then, something shifted. It started with the texts. At first it was casual, just a few check-ins after a workout, asking about the class or whether he'd seen her new post on social media. But then it became constant. Day and night at all hours her name would light up on his phone. At first, he would laugh it off, calling her annoying for texting so much, but he never ignored her. He always replied, saying she probably just didn't have many people to talk to, and then it got more personal, much more personal. That's when I started to feel uneasy. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was beginning to cross a line. It all began at the gym, a place that seemed so innocuous at first. CrossFit, with its community-oriented, we're all a family vibe, was supposed to be a positive outlet for him. He'd always been passionate about fitness, and I was glad he had a place to go where he could unwind and feel good about himself. When he told me about the people he'd met there, I imagined a bunch of sweaty, committed athletes all focused on their workouts. Then he started mentioning her more often. Her name was Maya, 25-year-old, who had recently joined the gym. He told me she was friendly, bubbly, and had a lot of energy, which, given his own love for the gym, was something he seemed to admire. It sounded harmless enough. After all, they were part of a bigger group, a close-knit bunch who hung out after workouts, grabbing coffee and chatting about life. He'd tell me about the family aspect of the gym, how everyone supported each other, how they helped each other push through the hard workouts. It sounded great, like something I could understand. But I wasn't prepared for the way this friendship would develop. Maya was new, and like a lot of people who join a group, she was eager to fit in and get to know everyone. But I never expected that she'd start texting him constantly, to the point where it felt like she was pulling him into her orbit. At first, he didn't seem bothered by it. He'd tell me, she's cool, but kind of over the top sometimes. Always texting me after class. He laughed it off, claiming she didn't have many friends and that he felt bad for her. He said it was nothing, that he was just being nice. He'd assure me that it was all friendly, nothing more. But something about it didn't sit right with me. I trusted him, of course. But over time, I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Maya wasn't just texting to chat about the workouts anymore. The content of her messages started to shift. I began hearing about how she was going through a tough time in her personal life, how her boyfriend wasn't quite what she expected, and how she didn't have anyone to talk to. At first, it seemed like an innocent conversation, but the deeper we got into these updates, the more I started feeling like something wasn't adding up. He'd mention her texts in passing, telling me that Maya was asking him for advice on her relationship or just venting about life, and he'd always say that he didn't mind helping out. He seemed to be genuinely concerned, offering a listening ear to someone who felt isolated. I didn't want to come across as controlling, so I stayed quiet at first. But slowly, my discomfort started to grow. It wasn't just the constant texting anymore. It was the things she was starting to share. Things that, to me, felt increasingly inappropriate for a married man to be discussing with someone he barely knew. She'd ask his opinion about her sex life with her boyfriend, talk about wanting to have a baby, and even send him photos of her outfits, asking if he thought they looked good. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why she felt the need to turn to him for these things, especially when she had so many other women at the gym who could be her confidants. He'd laugh and say, "She's just asking for advice, but I think it's a little weird, too." But the problem wasn't just that it was weird. It was that he kept answering her. Every time she'd text, he'd reply, even when it was late at night or early in the morning. And I couldn't shake the feeling that, as much as he tried to reassure me, there was something he wasn't seeing, or maybe didn't want to see, that this was crossing a line. And that line wasn't about his behavior, not directly, but about how she was pushing boundaries. I kept reminding myself that I trust him. I've always trusted him. But I couldn't ignore the creeping suspicion that Maya's friendship was starting to feel a little too much like something else. Was she trying to get closer? Was she using her problems to reel him in? I wasn't sure, but the more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. I wanted to believe he was just being kind, but at some point kindness feels like an excuse. An excuse to let things slip, to give someone who isn't your spouse more of your attention than they deserve. And that's where I was starting to struggle, balancing the trust I had in him with the growing feeling that something wasn't right. At first, I convinced myself that it was no big deal. After all, they were friends, just people who worked out together, hanging out after class, texting about the latest workout challenge. I told myself that I was just being paranoid, but as the days passed, it became harder and harder to ignore. The messages started coming at all hours of the day. Morning, afternoon, evening, and yes, even late at night. It was like she had no sense of time, no consideration for the fact that he had a family. No sense that it wasn't okay to keep texting someone at 10 p.m. when they had children to take care of and work in the morning. It started with casual check-ins, but it quickly escalated. Hey, how was your day? Followed by 15 more messages within an hour, full of random thoughts, life updates, and personal questions. I'd be sitting on the couch with my daughter, playing with my son, and I'd glance over to see my husband's phone buzzing again. Maya's name over and over. And every time he'd pick it up, every single time, I could tell he was starting to get frustrated. He'd complain about how she never gave him a break, how she texted all the time, even when he was at work. She's annoying, he'd say, laughing it off, but I could see the way he still replied. He never ignored her, never told her that he needed space or time for his family. He kept engaging, as though there was a part of him that didn't want to disappoint her. Or maybe he didn't want to be the one to push her away. But for me, the more I saw those messages, the more the feeling of unease crept in. I wasn't just feeling uncomfortable anymore. I was starting to feel resentful. Resentful of the way she was taking up so much space in his day. She was invading our life, taking his attention away from his wife and children, even though we were right there. It wasn't just the quantity of the text that bothered me, it was the content. As if the constant bombardment of messages wasn't enough, the topics of conversation started to get even more personal. Maya would ask him for advice on her relationship with her boyfriend, asking him questions about intimacy and their future together. She'd share intimate details of her life, things that seemed way too personal for a girl to be discussing with a married man. A man who had 2 children at home. I'd overhear bits and pieces of their conversations when he'd show me the texts, chuckling nervously. Look, she's asking me about whether she should have a baby with her boyfriend. Isn't that weird? He'd say, if it were just some lighthearted discussion. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was crossing a line. Was this something that a married man should be involved in? Shouldn't she be asking other women, people in her life who could offer advice without creating unnecessary complications? And then there were the photos. It started innocently enough. She'd ask him if her outfit looked okay, sending pictures of herself in various clothing, asking him for his opinion. Again, he'd laugh it off, showing me the pictures. She just wants to know if her outfit looks good, he'd say. She's a little insecure, I guess. But it didn't sit right with me. Not at all. Why was she asking him, a married man with a wife, about her outfits? Why wasn't she sending those pictures to a friend, a family member? Why did she feel comfortable asking for his validation? And yet every time she texted, he replied. He kept engaging, kept offering advice, kept validating her in ways that felt too intimate, too familiar. I tried to ignore it, telling myself that it was just the nature of their friendship. She didn't have many friends, I understood that. He was just being kind, being helpful. But the more it went on, the more I couldn't ignore the fact that these conversations weren't just friendly anymore. They were becoming something more. And I couldn't tell if he was aware of how far things had gone. It was at that moment I realized something. It wasn't just the texts. It wasn't just the photos. It was the fact that she was taking his attention away from me. She was drawing him into her world, and I wasn't sure I could compete with that. The worst part, I could tell he didn't want to hurt her feelings. He felt bad for her. And maybe, just maybe, that was what scared me the most. He was choosing to keep responding, to keep comforting her when he should have been setting boundaries. Boundaries that would protect our relationship, protect our family, and keep the space between them clear. And I felt so small, sitting there watching as my family slowly became her family too. It started to cross my mind more and more, like a heavy weight on my chest that I couldn't shake. I was trying so hard to be understanding, to trust him. I did trust him, But the more I heard about their conversations, the more I realized that something wasn't just a little off. It was starting to feel completely wrong. One day he showed me one of her texts. Just like he always did, thinking it was fine because he was transparent. But this one was different. She had texted him again about her boyfriend. She was upset, and it was clear from the message that she was venting, seeking validation. But then came the part that left me speechless. She asked him what she should do about her boyfriend's lack of affection. She went into details about their intimate life, about how they weren't connecting in the way she needed, and how frustrated she was. "Do you think I should bring it up with him? What do you think I should do?" She wrote. My heart sank. This wasn't a casual conversation. This wasn't a friend asking for advice about a personal issue. This was her asking my husband, a married man with children, to give advice about her sex life, about her relationship with her boyfriend. And what hurt the most wasn't just that she was talking to him about something so private. It was that he didn't immediately set a boundary. He didn't tell her that this was inappropriate or that he was uncomfortable with her discussing these things with him. He just responded. "Oh, I think you should talk to him about it," he said, from what I could gather. Just simple, harmless advice, or so he thought. But to me, it was more than that. It was her seeking validation from him, seeking comfort from someone who was supposed to be committed to me. The worst part. This wasn't the only conversation like that. She had shared other personal details with him too, about how she was questioning her relationship and whether she was really ready to have a baby with her boyfriend. She would send him pictures of herself, asking if she looked okay in certain outfits. And each time he would just laugh it off and tell me, "She's just asking for advice. I think it's a little strange too, but she seems to trust me." But why was she trusting him? Why was she confiding in a married man, asking him things that shouldn't be discussed with him? Why wasn't she reaching out to her girlfriends or family members who were single or in relationships for this kind of advice? It dawned on me slowly that what was happening wasn't just an innocent friendship. She wasn't just looking for someone to talk to. She was looking for someone to fill a gap, to fulfill emotional needs that I should have been the one fulfilling. And while my husband had his own reasons for not wanting to hurt her feelings, I could no longer ignore the fact that this was not okay. I tried to talk to him about it one evening, after I'd had enough. "Honey, I don't think it's appropriate that she's telling you these things. I mean, talking about her relationship with her boyfriend, asking for your advice about sex, sending you pictures of herself. Do you see how this could be a problem?" He was quiet for a moment, and then he shrugged. "She doesn't have many friends. I think she's just looking for someone to talk to. I don't want to be mean. She really does trust me." But that was the problem, wasn't it? Trust shouldn't be something that is given in such an intimate way, especially not to someone outside your marriage. And it wasn't just about the conversations anymore. It was about how comfortable she had become crossing boundaries with him. I could feel myself becoming more and more distant, not just from him, but from the trust I thought I had in our relationship. I didn't feel secure anymore. I felt like I was watching this relationship, this friendship, slowly overtake the boundaries we'd set. I know he was trying to be kind, trying to help someone who didn't have a lot of support. But at what point does kindness become enabling? At what point does trying to be nice to someone else start affecting your own family? And I couldn't ignore it anymore. She wasn't just a friend. She was someone who had started to take up far too much space in our lives. A space she wasn't invited into. I sat in the living room that evening, staring at the blank screen of my phone. I didn't know what to do with my feelings anymore. My husband sat next to me, chatting casually, flipping through TV channels as if nothing had changed. But something had changed, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I trusted him. I had always trusted him. We had built a life together, a family. We'd been through so much. The ups and downs, the fights and the makeups, the births of our children, and the quiet moments that had defined our marriage. Trust wasn't something I just gave away lightly. It was earned over time, through honesty, communication, and the shared knowledge that we'd always have each other's backs. But now every time I looked at my phone, I felt that knot in my stomach again. Every time I heard his phone buzz with a new message, I felt the tightness in my chest, the anxious questioning of what was really going on. The messages, the pictures, the personal topics they shared, none of it seemed to align with the boundaries of a normal, respectful friendship. And no matter how hard I tried to talk myself out of it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He always reassured me. He always did. "She's just lonely. I'm just being nice. I'm not interested in her like that. Trust me." And I believed him. I did. because he was my husband and he had never given me any reason to doubt him before. But my gut was telling me something different. I trusted him, yes. But my instincts were telling me that this was more than just a friendship, that Maya's attention wasn't innocent. It wasn't just about wanting advice or having someone to talk to. There was something deeper there, something that neither she nor my husband were acknowledging. And I couldn't ignore it anymore. The hardest part was that I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I didn't want to be the one who was controlling, accusing, or insecure. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't feeling jealous because of some imagined slight. I was feeling uneasy because the situation itself was inappropriate. It wasn't normal for a married man to share intimate details about someone else's relationship with his wife, let alone engage in those kinds of conversations. But I also couldn't deny that I was torn. My husband seemed so genuinely oblivious to what was happening. He wasn't malicious. He wasn't trying to hurt me. He was just caught in a web of kindness and guilt, trying to help someone who didn't have many people to turn to. He didn't want to hurt her feelings, and I understood that. But what I couldn't understand was why he couldn't see that his kindness was turning into something that wasn't just innocent anymore. And then there were the little moments, the times when he would come home and tell me about something she said or texted him. He'd laugh and brush it off, but I could hear the subtle tension in his voice. The way he said things like, "She's just really clingy," or "She always asks for my advice because I'm the only one who listens." I could hear it, and every time he mentioned her name, I felt a little more disconnected from him. It wasn't about her, it was about how he didn't seem to understand that he was letting someone else into our lives, someone who shouldn't be there. It wasn't just about the messages anymore. It was the fact that they had created a space between us. A space where she existed, where he listened to her, gave her advice, validated her feelings, and I was left on the outside, wondering why I wasn't the one he was talking to about all of this. Why wasn't he coming to me when he had doubts or questions? Why was he so quick to engage with someone else's emotional needs, while ignoring the ones right in front of him? I trusted him, yes, but I also knew that trust wasn't a free pass to ignore the signs that something was wrong. Trust had to be earned every day with respect, boundaries, and a commitment to put the relationship first. And right now, it felt like that commitment was wavering. Not because of any overt betrayal, but because of the subtle way someone else was creeping into our lives, into his thoughts, and into the emotional space that should have been reserved for us. I had to talk to him about it. I had to find the words to tell him that it wasn't about her. It was about us. And if he couldn't see that, then maybe we were facing a deeper issue than I was ready to admit. But at that moment, sitting there next to him, I wasn't sure how to even begin. I wasn't sure if he'd hear me or if he'd just brush it off as my insecurities. I wasn't sure if I could trust myself to say it without making everything worse. But one thing was clear: I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. It started off so subtly, a few innocent questions here and there, some harmless advice. But over time, the nature of the messages began to shift, and the more I saw it, the more it gnawed at me. Maya's texts were no longer just about workout tips or friendly chat. They were personal, too personal. And the worst part, he never seemed to see how inappropriate they were getting. One evening, he showed me his phone again. He was laughing, thinking it was just another weird conversation, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. A discomfort that he couldn't fully articulate. "Look at this," he said, showing me a text from Maya. She had asked him for advice about her relationship. Again, this time it wasn't just about her boyfriend's behavior. She was talking about her future with him, whether they should get married, and how uncertain she felt. She even mentioned the idea of having children with him, and she was asking for his opinion. She wasn't asking just for advice on relationships anymore. She was asking him to guide her life decisions, to help her figure out the most intimate aspects of her future. I couldn't stop myself from feeling the weight of that moment. This was not appropriate. Why was she talking to him about these things? And why was he replying? "I'm really not sure what to tell her," he said, his voice almost sounding like he was genuinely caught off guard by the gravity of the situation. "But I can't just ignore her, she's been through a lot." That was his excuse. It always came down to this: I feel bad for her. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't about kindness anymore. This wasn't just two people offering support. This was her asking for something far more intimate. And the fact that he didn't see how far things had gone made my stomach turn. I tried to explain, softly, how this wasn't okay. I said, "You're her friend, but this isn't just a friendship anymore. She's sharing things with you that are way too personal. She's asking for advice about her future. about marriage, about having babies. And these are things she should be talking to someone else about. It's not right that she's coming to you. He nodded, but then shrugged it off. I get it, but I really think she just needs someone to talk to. That's when I felt it, deep down. The nagging feeling that maybe I was the one who had been blind all along. Maybe I was the one who was too trusting, too patient. But no, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I couldn't just sit back and pretend this was normal. This wasn't just about her needing help. This was about emotional intimacy crossing lines that shouldn't have been crossed. The texts continued, and each time they grew more personal. She started sending pictures of herself, photos and outfits, asking him if she looked good, if he thought they suited her. The casual, "What do you think?" turned into something that felt too intimate for my comfort. Why was she sending these to him? She had friends for that. She had a boyfriend for that. But she was sending them to my husband. It felt like a direct challenge to me. Not only because she was constantly taking up his time and attention, but because she was using her vulnerability to get closer to him. She had created an emotional space that I wasn't part of. And that space was growing bigger every day. I didn't know what to do. I trusted him. I really did. But this felt like a slow unraveling of our connection. The more I tried to communicate my discomfort, the more I felt like I was the one being unreasonable. He was still so adamant that he was just being helpful, that Maya really needed someone to talk to, and that he wasn't doing anything wrong. But the more I watched it unfold, the more I realized that it wasn't just about helping her. She was using him, and he was allowing it. There was a point where I couldn't take it anymore. One night he came to bed late, his phone buzzing beside him. He'd been texting her again, about something trivial, I'm sure, but my mind was already spiraling, thinking of everything they'd been talking about before. I pulled the covers over myself, feeling cold, feeling distant, and when he tried to kiss me goodnight, I turned away. It wasn't just the texts. It wasn't even the pictures. It was that I had become a third party in our relationship, the one who was on the outside, who didn't get to be part of these conversations, these moments. And I couldn't just ignore that anymore. I had to face the reality of it. This was no longer an innocent friendship, and no matter how much I trusted him, I couldn't continue to ignore the fact that this was crossing a line. I knew the conversation had to happen. It had been building up in me for weeks, simmering beneath the surface of our daily routine. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The nagging doubts, the subtle jealousy, the growing sense of discomfort, all of it had reached a tipping point. I had to talk to him about Maya. I had to express how much this friendship was affecting me and our relationship. But I didn't know how to start. It's strange, isn't it? When you love someone, and you feel like you've built a life together, and then you reach a point where you have to question whether that life is really as strong as you thought. I didn't want to come across as controlling or paranoid, but deep down, I knew that something wasn't right. My feelings weren't just based on jealousy, they were based on a genuine concern that something was slipping through our fingers. So, one evening, as we sat down after dinner, I decided to bring it up. "Honey," I started, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk about Maya." He looked up from his phone, his usual distracted expression quickly shifting to one of concern. "What about her?" he asked, setting the phone down on the table. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak the words I had been rehearsing in my mind. "I don't know, but I've been feeling uncomfortable with the way she's been texting you. All the time. And the things she's asking you, I just don't think it's appropriate." He sat back, running a hand through his hair. "I get that, I really do. I know it's a lot, but I don't want to be rude to her. She doesn't have many friends, and I think she's just looking for someone to talk to." His words stung. I nodded slowly, feeling my chest tighten. "I understand that, but it's more than that now. She's asking you about personal things, about her relationship, her sex life, her future. And she's sending you pictures of herself. It's too much. It's not just friendly advice anymore." He looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room. "I know. I've been trying to figure out how to set boundaries with her. But I don't want to hurt her feelings, you know. I don't want to make her feel like she has no one." I wanted to scream. It wasn't about Maya's feelings, it was about us. It was about our marriage, our trust, and the boundaries that should have been set a long time ago. I felt like he was so focused on being nice to her that he didn't see how much this was affecting me. "I get that you don't want to hurt her feelings," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But what about my feelings? What about our family? Do you not see how much this is affecting us? You're giving her so much of your time and attention, and I'm feeling left out." He sighed deeply, running his hand through his hair again, clearly frustrated. I'm not trying to make you feel that way. I just didn't want to be harsh with her. She's been through a lot, and I know she's lonely. I don't want to be mean." The words hit me like a punch. He didn't want to be mean. He didn't want to hurt her. But he was hurting me. He was hurting us. And somehow that didn't seem to register in the same way. He was more concerned with her feelings than mine. More focused on keeping the peace with her than on setting clear boundaries that respected our relationship. "I'm not asking you to be mean," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm asking you to put our family first, to realize that whatever this is between you and her, it's crossing a line, and it's making me uncomfortable." He looked at me, his eyes softening for a moment. "I'm sorry. I really didn't mean for any of this to upset you. I'll talk to her. I'll set boundaries, I promise." But I wasn't convinced. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But everything inside me told me that this wasn't just something he could fix with a few words. It wasn't just a matter of saying, "Hey, don't text me so much." This was deeper. It was about respect. It was about understanding the line between kindness and emotional intimacy. It was about knowing when to step back and say, "This isn't appropriate." And he wasn't there yet. "I need more than just promises," I said softly. "I need action. I need to see you set boundaries and respect them. I need to know that you're prioritizing our relationship, our family, and not getting tangled up in someone else's emotional needs." He nodded, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. He didn't want to hurt Maya. He didn't want to let her down. But at that moment it felt like he was letting me down, and that hurt more than I was prepared for. I couldn't stop thinking about it. The more I tried to convince myself that everything would be okay, the more my mind spun with questions I couldn't ignore. What does she want? That question kept echoing in my head, getting louder each day. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I wasn't seeing. Something Maya wasn't saying, but was definitely showing. Was it just loneliness driving her to text my husband so much? Was she just seeking a friend, or was there something deeper here? Something more manipulative? She was clearly aware of my husband's kindness. He was always there for her when she needed someone to talk to. He was nice, he listened, and that made him a perfect emotional support for someone who felt neglected or lonely. But was that all there was to it? I had tried so hard to stay calm. I didn't want to be the jealous wife. I didn't want to come off as paranoid or insecure. But every time I saw him checking his phone or replying to her messages, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach. And it wasn't because I didn't trust him. It was because I did. And because I trusted him, I couldn't help but question why someone else was getting so much of his time and energy. What was her true intention? Was she trying to be friends with him, or was there something more insidious at play? She was younger, single, and clearly seeking advice about her relationship. But when you start texting a married man about personal issues, things that belong in a conversation with a partner, not someone else's spouse, it doesn't sit right. I started to notice the subtle signs. She never asked him for advice about relationships in a general way. It wasn't he. "What do you think I should do if I'm having issues with my boyfriend?" No, it was more like, "What would you do if you were me?" And "How do you think I should handle this situation with my boyfriend?" She was asking him to think with her. She was involving him in decisions that no one outside of a serious relationship should be a part of. Decisions about her future, her emotions, and her intimate life. And those weren't just random questions. Those questions were about him, weren't they? About what he thought she should do. She wanted his validation, his insight, his guidance. She was leaning on him, and she was getting a lot of attention in return. My mind started racing. What if this was her way of slowly pulling him in? What if she was planting seeds, harmless at first but slowly growing into something more serious? She knew how to play her cards. She knew how to get what she wanted. And my husband, he didn't see it. He thought he was just being helpful. But in reality, he was feeding her need for attention. And I was starting to feel like I was watching something that could turn into a problem that would be hard to undo. I tried talking to him about it again, but every time I mentioned my concerns, he brushed it off, saying that I was reading too much into it. "She's just a friend," he'd say. "She needs someone to talk to. It's nothing." But I couldn't let go of the feeling that it wasn't nothing. It was something. Something that was crossing a line that he didn't even realize was there. Every time Maya reached out to him, she was taking up more space in his life. She was finding ways to insert herself into his emotional world, and I felt like I was being pushed further and further out. And then there was the moment that shook me to my core. One evening as we sat down to dinner, his phone buzzed again. He reached for it instinctively, tapping on the screen as I stared at him. I wanted to ask, "Who is it?" but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Instead, I just watched, waiting for him to finish. When he put the phone down, he casually said, "It's Maya." She asked for some advice about her boyfriend. Something inside me snapped. I could feel my pulse racing. Do you really think it's appropriate for her to be asking you about her relationship issues all the time? I asked, my voice unsteady. He looked at me, confused. I'm just trying to help her, that's all. She's going through a rough patch. I know, but it's getting too much. She's asking for personal advice about her relationship, her future, her sex life. Why does she keep coming to you for all of this? I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. He paused, his brow furrowing. I don't know, I guess I'm just the one she feels comfortable talking to. But I'm not doing anything wrong. The problem wasn't that he was doing something wrong. It was that he didn't see how her presence was becoming invasive. It wasn't just that she was talking to him, it was that she was becoming emotionally reliant on him, sharing parts of herself that should have remained private or at least shared with a friend, not someone else's husband. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to confront this head on, but I also knew that no matter what I said, the real question still hung in the air. What does she want? And the harder I tried to understand her intentions, the more I realized she wanted him. Not just as a friend, but as someone who was providing emotional support, validating her decisions and filling the space that she felt was empty. And all the while, I was left wondering if she would ever take a step back and realize that she was taking more than she was giving. I had been thinking about it for days. Every time I saw him glance at his phone, every time Maya's name flashed across the screen, that gnawing feeling in my stomach grew stronger. I had tried to ignore it. I had tried to trust him, but I couldn't do it anymore. My mind wouldn't let it go. I had to talk to him. I couldn't keep holding this inside. The problem wasn't just the texts. It wasn't just the pictures. It wasn't even the constant communication that she'd started to demand. It was the fact that I felt like I was losing him, little by little, not because he was physically leaving, but because emotionally he was slipping away. And Maya, whether she realized it or not, was filling that emotional gap. I knew this conversation was coming, and I hated the feeling of anxiety that kept building up. I had so many things to say, but I wasn't sure how to say them without sounding jealous, insecure, or like I was trying to control him. But the truth was, I wasn't trying to control him. I just wanted him to see what I was seeing, to understand the way this situation was affecting me. He was sitting on the couch when I finally decided to bring it up. I had been avoiding it for so long, but it was no longer something I could ignore. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "We need to talk about Maya," I said, my voice steady but tight. He looked up from his phone, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. "What about her?" I paused, gathering my thoughts. I didn't want to come off too harshly, but I couldn't hold back anymore. "I've been thinking about the way she's been texting you, and I don't feel comfortable with it anymore." He sighed, setting his phone down and turning toward me. I knew this was coming. "What's bothering you now?" I tried to keep my tone calm, even though inside I felt like my heart was racing. "It's not just the texting anymore. It's what she's asking you. Personal stuff, about her relationship, about her sex life, about wanting to have kids. She's sending you pictures of herself asking for your opinion on her outfits. I don't think it's appropriate." He looked a little taken aback. "I get it. I really do. But she doesn't have many friends, and I don't want to just ignore her. She asks for advice, and I think she trusts me." I swallowed hard. I get that she might not have a lot of friends. But it's not just advice she's asking for. She's asking you for emotional support. For things that are really personal. Things that a single friend or someone she's dating should be talking to her about, not you. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I don't see it like that. She's just reaching out. I'm not trying to replace her friends or anything, but I'm the one she talks to. She trusts me, and I don't want to be mean to her." It hurt to hear him say that. He didn't understand. Being nice wasn't the issue. The issue was that he was too nice. He was giving her something she shouldn't have been getting from him. And in doing so, he was making me feel invisible. "You're not being mean, but you're not setting any boundaries," I said, my voice wavering. "You keep replying to her. You keep engaging in these personal conversations, and it's starting to feel like you're more invested in her emotional world than in mine. And that hurts. Because I need you here with me, in this marriage." There was a long pause. He didn't respond right away, and the silence between us felt heavy. I could see him processing what I said. But I didn't know if he truly understood the depth of it. I wasn't asking him to cut her off completely. I was asking him to respect our marriage and recognize that this relationship with her was crossing a line. "I didn't mean for any of this to hurt you," He finally said, his voice softer now. But I don't know how to handle it. I don't want to be harsh with her. I don't want to make her feel bad. I felt a sharp pang of frustration. It's not about making her feel bad. It's about you realizing that your loyalty should be to me, to us. You can't just keep enabling her, pretending that this is harmless. You've got to set some boundaries, or it's going to keep pushing us further apart. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. It wasn't that he didn't care. It was that he didn't fully understand the impact this was having on our relationship. He was caught up in wanting to be kind, in wanting to be the person who was there for her. But he didn't realize how much he was giving away in the process. I'll talk to her, he said, his voice quiet. I'll make it clear that there's a limit to what I can talk to her about. I'll try to set some boundaries. But even as he said the words, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I didn't know if he could truly see how much this was affecting me, how much it was changing the dynamic between us. And that was the scariest part of all. The fact that I was starting to feel like I was losing him, bit by bit, to someone who wasn't even supposed to be in our lives in the first place. The conversation we had that night wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had been avoiding it for so long, thinking that maybe I was overreacting, or maybe it was just a phase. But as the words left my mouth, I realized just how much I had been holding in. It wasn't just about Maya or the texts. It was about something deeper, something that had been building quietly under the surface for months. I had trusted him. I had trusted our marriage. But over time, I realized that trust wasn't enough to keep our relationship intact. Trust without boundaries isn't trust at all. It's a free pass for things to slip away unnoticed. And I couldn't allow that to happen anymore. I couldn't keep ignoring the fact that I was feeling left out, that the emotional connection I thought we shared was being diluted by someone else. It wasn't just about Maya. It was about me, about us, about creating a space where both of us could feel secure, respected, and valued. And I knew that in order for us to move forward, I had to set boundaries. Not just with Maya, but with my own emotions and expectations too. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when I felt neglected. I couldn't keep allowing him to be emotionally available to someone else while I was left on the sidelines. And more importantly, I couldn't allow him to keep ignoring the impact it was having on me, on our family, on our life together. I told him that night, I don't want to control you, but I need you to see that this isn't just about her. This is about us, our relationship, our family, and we need to set boundaries. We need to protect what we have. He agreed. He promised to talk to her to set clear boundaries and to prioritize our relationship. But I knew that promises were just words. The real work would come in the form of action. Setting boundaries in relationships is hard. It feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're challenging the very thing you're trying to protect. But I've learned that without boundaries, there can be no respect. Without respect, there can be no trust. Have you ever had to set boundaries in a relationship? How did it change things for you? Share your experience in the comments. Let's talk about the importance of boundaries in keeping relationships strong. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations about love, trust, and the courage it takes to protect what matters most.